Let me just turn off
Welcome to Your Story Matters. My name is Linda Olson. I'm the founder of Wealth to Stories and Your Story Matters Masterclass. Today we have another gifted expert who truly understands story. Her name is LisaBloom. Lisa is a professional storyteller, accredited coach, author, mentor, and leadership expert. She's the founder of Story Coach, works with entrepreneurs and business owners to help them find confidence, attract ideal clients, and find their success story. Her groundbreaking techniques have enabled her to grow her business and take to the stage where she speaks intentionally about this approach to business, leadership, and coaching. Lisa, welcome to Your Story Matters.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Well, thank you. It's great to have you. So tell our listeners where you are and what you're doing there.
Well, I'm based in Israel, and I'm doing probably similar to them. I'm, living my life and working my business. I work with entrepreneurs all over the world, with corporate leaders as well, in lots of different places. It's almost like nowadays, this is what fascinates me, that it doesn't really matter where you are. It's like we just get the work done. And on an average day, I can be working, with people in 4 different continents, and it's that thrills me. That's a whole new world from the world I grew up in. So, yeah, it's really fun to be able to work this way and to be able to connect with you on the other side of the world. Completely different time zone.
Yes, absolutely. Well, to me this is fascinating that we can do this, and I think it's so fun. So tell our listeners how it was that you got started with story.
Sure. So I was, my background is in corporate, and I was always fascinated by the training experience. I was in learning and development. I managed the function, but I love to get into the classroom and to just notice that moment when adults kind of get that spark in their eye and they learn something, or they open up to something. And I found, working in a corporate environment, you don't always in fact, you never get to choose what you are going to train or what you're going to talk about. But I found that while I was training things that perhaps weren't that interesting to me, I would throw in stories. It was just something I naturally did. But I noticed that every time I told a story, something really magical happened. People really shifted. I mean, there was a physiological shift, but there was also this shift in understanding and connection and in engagement and it turned out also in learning. So when you tell a story, people actually remember and they make those beautiful connections, and suddenly the learning is much deeper, much more rich. And so that was really the start of me thinking, there's something in this story thing. This isn't just something I've always done because, that's kind of part of my personality, but there's actually something really useful. And when I left corporate and went into my own business, I realized, it was just, story kept coming back to me. Initially, I went into coaching, but what fascinated me around that time that I started my own business was that I discovered storytelling as a, traditional professional storytelling as a profession, as a thing that I hadn't quite realized. Gosh, this is what I've been doing all my life. I remember the day I walked into a room full of storytellers to a performance, and I remember thinking, it was almost like it felt like the walls were shaking. And I'm sure many of the listeners have had this recognition when you do something and it just feels like home. It feels like, yes, that's it. That's the thing I've always done. And so I walk into this performance and I see these storytellers, and I remember in the break, I went up to one of the people and I said, I hear you have a course teaching storytelling. I want to join. And she said, oh, wonderful. And I said, no, like, take my money. I want to join now. I have to do this. I have to start. And I was just so passionate and began to notice how, as a professional storyteller, what was happening, from the stage to the audience, that were magnetized and that were just, you could hear the proverbial pin drop when I would tell a story. I began to realize, gosh, this is a really fascinating and powerful tool for the other parts of my professional life. So going into coaching, so there's something really familiar about coaching and storytelling, something really connected. And of course, the day that I realized we define our reality by the stories we tell, was the day that I began to see, you know, the whole business spread out in front of me. That if you can shift somebody's inner story, if you can help them build a powerful outer story, then you can help them market their business, and you can help them stand up on stages, and you can help them be compelling and be engaging and be inspiring, and you can help them have this beautiful, peaceful inner story too. And that's really how the whole thing, you know, where it all came from. Very long answer to a very short question, but that's really how it all developed over the years.
Oh, well, no, thank you for sharing that. I think that is fascinating, and how you came to this place. So what to you was that, you know, you just kind of talked about some of that transition. Was that, you know, would you consider that a pain point for you? Or was there something else that transitioned you that, you know, was just really transformational?
Well, I think when you talk about a pain point, there was this moment. And I remember I had just come back from, I had just had one of my children. I was on maternity leave, and I came back from maternity leave into the corporate environment. And I remember I went to this meeting, and I was called into a meeting with senior leaders. And I remember walking into the meeting room, there was this oval table, and most of the people were already there. I remember I walked in, I put my bag on the table, and I pulled out a notebook. And it was one of those notebooks that has a spiral metal binder. So as I pulled it out, and this is maybe 2 months after I'd returned from maternity leave, as I pulled the spiral binder out of my bag, I noticed that there was this tiny, tiny baby sock attached to the end of the binder. And as I pulled it out, I saw this little tiny sock, and I just got this, you know, just this flush of joy when I thought about my baby, my newborn, you know, as I took this out, and I just had this huge smile on my face. And I looked up, and I looked around the table, and I realized that if anybody had seen me, they immediately looked away, and nobody was smiling. And in that moment, I realized that there really wasn't a place for me as mother in this boardroom, that I had to, you know, compartmentalize who I was so that I could show up as the professional Lisa, you know, training and development manager, versus the person I had become in this miraculous period of becoming a mother, which in my opinion made me better in the boardroom. And the boardroom made me better as a mother, but it's like suddenly I felt like I had to separate. I couldn't be whole. And I think that's the moment that the seed was planted, that I want to do something that I can bring my whole self into, and that this is not a way to live. This is not a way to work where you can't be the full person. And that's part of my drive to also still work with corporate and with leaders, is to help them understand that our personal stories and our story, who we are as a person all the way through, is inseparable. And it's only by acknowledging and hearing those stories that we can actually bring our full selves and our full talents and our gifts to whatever we do. So, yeah.
Wow, that's thank you for sharing that, because I truly believe that is so needed. And I think it's fascinating to see you go through that journey through story to really be able to develop that. So,
and you know, and that also kind of developed out into the whole entrepreneurial journey, because it was clear to me that I don't want to have this separate existence, and I want to do something that really has meaning and that really has purpose, and that I can also do on my own terms. So while my kids were small, I would only work certain hours, and I worked late at night, and I really could build my business around my life rather than what most of us do, which is build our lives around our jobs.
yes.
And so that kind of set me out on this very interesting, fascinating, challenging, and rewarding journey of building my own business and beginning to work with people, you know, all over the world.
So what's your primary focus at this time?
At this actual moment, my primary focus is that I'm writing a new book, and I'm very, very excited about that. And it's a book about the stories that that we need to lead in our lives, whether we're leaders in organizations or whether we're leading in our destiny, in our journey, in our entrepreneurial journey. But really what I'm very, very passionate about helping people to transform the stories that are not working for them, to be able to identify when they have a story that's holding them back, and to be able to build the lives and the businesses that they dream of. And to do it in a way that's realistic. And I guess, people often say, so what is your brand? I think my brand is just really, the secret to my brand was revealed to me actually through, I was at a conference and this woman came up to me and said, "Oh, hi, Lisa." And I'd never seen her before in my life. I had no idea who she was. And I said, "Hi, do I know you?" And she said, "No, but I've been on your list for years. And I love, I love the stories you write, and I love how you share your life with us." And then she looked at me, she says, "My goodness, you're so real." It was so funny. And it kind of took me back. "You're so real." And I said, "Okay." And she said, "I mean, you just appear like you sound and like you read and like you are online, and that's so rare." And I think that's a real passion point for me, is to be able to help people just show up and be real and tell a real story and deal with the real story. And if the story is too painful to tell, then to figure out how to tell it, to transform it so that it's no longer painful, but it's empowering. Because every story, and you know this so well, every story that we have, that we hold, and especially the ones that we find difficult to tell, are just ripe for transformation, because they're the stories that we grow from and we learn from and we expand from. So when you can tell that story, then you really become fully empowered and enabled to do whatever it is you want to do.
Wow, so true. And I think you have a fascinating way to help people in their journey. Their journey obviously is their story, but so many people are stuck in different places in their story. And I think your approach to this just really gives them freedom to be able to move on and embrace whatever they can, or help them tell it in whatever way they can. Absolutely love it.
I also think that there's something important about this concept of your story. When you ask somebody, "What's your story?" very often they'll give you this long drawn out, blow by blow chronological list of all the things that ever happened to them in their lives. And in my opinion, that's not story. It's not story. Story is a moment in time. Story is literally a moment in time when something happens that moves us. And when you can tell that story in a way that serves the person listening, in a way that really it's almost like a gift, where it's relevant and it's meaningful and it does something for them. I don't believe it's all about self-expression. I think story is being of service. I mean, we can all go and write our story and tell our story, and the only person who really cares about that is perhaps our closest loved ones. But I think what's really important is finding the nuggets in our stories, finding the points, the learnings, the strength in our story, so that we can share with others to empower them. It's a service. It's not about self-expression as much as about empowerment, empowering others. That's how I see it. And I think that when you dive into these moments of story in your life, you begin to see patterns, and you begin to see how you show up in the world, and you begin to understand what I call your superpowers, like this core story of who you are. And that's the place where people really grow from. So a lot of the work I'm doing is helping people find their core story, like helping them understand it's not about the incident that happened 20 years ago necessarily. It's not necessarily about the fact that they grew up in such a place, or that they were the children of such a person, or that, or anything like that. It's not about what happened to them. It's about how they show up. And how you show up is the secret that can be revealed through all these moments. That, to me, is the fascinating journey of story.
Yes. Wow. I love it. So you've left us with a lot of wonderful nuggets. Is there any specific, just golden nugget that you could leave with our listeners today?
Yeah, I guess I think the real secret of being able to find a compelling story, being able to tell a compelling story, and being able to live a compelling story, is to pay attention to the moments. And I call them, the pivotal moments. And a pivotal moment is not necessarily the most meaningful thing that's ever happened in your life. A pivotal moment is when you feel moved. And so it can happen in a conversation, it can happen in an observation, it can happen in a memory. But when you are aware of a shift in your emotion or a shift in your understanding, a shift of how you feel, you begin to see that something here is worth telling as a story. It's like a story-worthy moment. And when you can hone in on that moment, not only do you become more compelling in the way you speak and in the way you connect with people, you actually begin to appreciate life more. And that's the amazing thing. I remember one of my coaches years ago saying to me, if you want to create a community, attract an audience, you've got to write more often. You've got to tell stories more often. You need to tell a story once a week and send it out as an e-zine. And I was like, my life isn't that interesting. How am I going to find a story every week? But I began to hone in on the moments and to create stories out of these moments. And I have, I've put out an e-zine every week for 9 years. I've never stopped writing these stories. So I've always been able to find a story. But more importantly, I think that it's helped me notice these moments in my life more and become more appreciative and more filled with gratitude for these moments. And of course, these moments become interesting stories. And we all have them. Just we're often too busy or too preoccupied or too distracted to pay attention, or too much connected to our mobile whatevers to pay attention. So my tip, I guess, for the listeners is to notice the moment where you feel moved and think about what's the story there, like what happened, not what does it mean, not taking it to an abstract, but what actually happened. And there's a story there that's worth discovering.
Oh, I love it. Well, Lisa, you are just a joy to listen to. I think I could just listen to you all day. I know that
Thank you.
have a very special gift for our listeners. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. So I have an ebook called Using Stories to Get Great Clients. And it's just a way to begin to connect with the stories that are going to be relevant and interesting and will help you become more compelling so that you can attract clients in. But in addition to that, I wanted to invite anybody who's interested in exploring their story, and particularly in finding these moments and understanding how to take that moment of experience, and transform it and craft it into a compelling story. Anybody who's interested in exploring that a little bit, and particularly, exploring that in the context of building their business and being able to move forward, I want to invite them to a consultation. So all the details, I believe, will be somewhere on the page that they can click through. And I look forward to meeting anybody who's fascinated by story.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Lisa, for sharing your wisdom, your insights, and your passion for story is just so clear. I absolutely love it. So thank you for doing that. And we want to thank our listeners as well for taking the time out to join us today. And we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Thank you.